This is We All Be News and Radio.
Ron Hurd. Get up out of bed. Let's go. Let's go. Ron Hurd. That's the word. Get out of bed. Give me a jingle. My number 051. Get out of bed. Let's go. Don't be afraid. This is Herb Smith calling you. Herb Smith. All right, I know you're famous and all that kind of stuff, but let's go. Get out of bed.
And welcome, Black family, to another wonderful edition of the Artivist Presents We All Be News and Radio. I'm your host for the Empowerment segment, Brother Ron, also known as R2, P2, H2, the Artivist. And we got a great one for you tonight. They have a lot of back-to-back good ones. Special September, a lot of shows coming up, a lot of surprise guests, a lot of great things. And we'd love to have you join us tonight for this very special show. The call-in number is area code 646-652-4593. That's area code 646-652-4593. And if you're scared to get on the air, we'll open up the chat room so you can type in your questions and comments. And who knows, I might share them with our very important, wonderful, and esteemed guests tonight. Tonight's show is a great one, indeed, as promised. We're going to be talking about the straight dope with our guest, LeRon Barton. Also touching upon Ferguson and Baba Dick Gregory getting his Hollywood star. We'll talk about that later on in the discussion, but without further ado, let's get to the most important part of this first hour. We're interviewing Brother LeRon Barton, who is the publisher of Straight Dope, the publisher and the author of Straight Dope, a 360-degree look into American drug culture. Is also the founder of Mainline Publications, which is the first book, of course, Straight Dope. And we're going to get to the straight no chaser here. We're going to get this wonderful, fantastic brother on to talk about his book, his magnum opus of the moment. Brother LeRon Barton, how you doing today, sir? Or tonight, rather?
Good, man. Yourself?
I'm good, man. I'm still alive. I'm talking to you. It's football time. It's football time. I know you're a Niner fan, but you're from Kansas City, from KC.
Well, yeah. Like my mom, as much as I love her, shout out to my mom. She was sort of a bandwagoner. She started rooting for the Niners back in the 80s when Joe Montana and Jerry Rice was killing it and all that. And me kind of following after my mom, I started watching the Niners back in the mid 80s. And I've been riding with them ever since. And since I live in San Francisco, it's only right for me to be a super duper diehard Niners fan. So, I'm happy about the victory yesterday. It wasn't the best W, but nevertheless, it was a W, right?
Definitely. A win is a win, of course. I'm a hard-luck Cowboys fan. I remember the good old days of the 90s. Those are like all the glory days of the 80s, but y'all got a renaissance going on, man. So I'm a hard-luck Cowboys fan. I'll let too many people know about that. I'm not really proud of it, but I'm thinking about nostalgia. And speaking of nostalgia, we're talking about sort of this very controversial, looking back on the war on drugs through your very wonderful book, Straight Dope, a 360-degree look into American drug culture. I read this book in one second. I think I put this book down. It was a very powerful book. I mean, I just love the fact what you did with it. I just want to know what motivates you to write this book.
Well, first off, like I've been a writer pretty much my entire life, and I wanted to have my first release be something powerful. Instead of a work of fiction, I wanted my first project to elicit response and to get a conversation going. And so being from where I'm from, I mean, I'm from Southside Kansas City, where it's, you know, it's a fairly rough neighborhood, and being that I'm around drugs so much, I wanted to ask the question: is that why are drugs so inundated in our everyday life? And I didn't want to come at it from a sort of a academia standpoint. I didn't want to put any slant of my own. I just wanted to just have people talk. And so one of my favorite writers is Studs Terkel. And Studs, he would pick a topic, and he would just, you know, turn his tape recorder on, and he would just ask people questions. And I loved how he elicited the most honest responses. So I just, instead of talking to, like, you know, all these talking heads, these doctors, these politicians, I just wanted to get to the people who are really living it. And I wanted as you said earlier, answers that are straight with no chaser, and hence Straight Dope was born.
I mean, while I was reading your book, it was incredible, like the different perspectives you gave on the drug culture issue, on use of drugs. I want to ask you, before I delve into it too deeply,
sure,
in your opinion, is marijuana a gateway drug? Yes or no?
I'm gonna keep it so real with you right now. I can speak from my point of view as well as from others. Everyone that I interviewed in Straight Dope who used meth, crack, cocaine, heroin, they started out using marijuana. So I'm gonna say yes, because the fact that I've never known anyone to just stay on marijuana. So I mean that it's a hard question. It's a hard question to give an answer, because I know some people that have been potheads for a very, very long time, and that, you know, they may dibble and dabble, but their preference is pot. But that's the thing; most of them will sort of graduate. So so I would have to say yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. I see how it was like one of the themes in the book I was picking up on the different characters and stories. It seemed like marijuana was like a low entry level to something else. And also what I picked upon is that people were like products of their environment. Or, you know, is that, when you say that's true, that people are products of their environment, like you really don't have a choice, or do you have a choice in the selection of drugs?
Well, all right, so now, again, talking about myself, I mean, I tried various drugs when I was younger, and and being from where I'm from, you know, drugs are more accessible. You know, you can get them, and drug use is a bit more celebrated. So I think that you can start out as a product of your environment, but it's up to you to kind of stay there, though. You know, I mean, I've always felt that life is a choice. You know, life is just a series of choices, and you know, while some people may be born in an environment that fosters this whole love of using drugs and alcohol, you know, it's up to you to decide, do you want to stay there or not. You know, not everyone is born with the same lot in life, but you know, it's up to you to decide, okay, you know, do I still want to, you know, do I want to be a crackhead? You know, do I want to do heroin like my brother? I mean, it's a choice, and it's a difficult choice. You know, I mean, it's not something that, you know, you can just say, oh, well, you know, you can just kind of just like shine off and just, you know, like that silly ass quote, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. I mean, it's a bit tougher, but at the end of the day, it is your choice, though.
And that's what I was looking at, too, when I was reading the book. There's certain things I was picking up upon that you know, when people think about drug use in this country or drug-related crimes, you normally think of, like, I guess the black boogeyman or the young black male or something like that. But the face I'm picking up is a very white, middle-class face in your book. Can you explain what I'm talking about here? I mean, like when I say that.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, so many of the people that I spoke with came from middle class families. I mean, example, the woman Carolyn, you know, she came from a fairly conservative background. You know, her, I mean, even though her family, I believe Carolyn's family was associated with white supremacist activities, her income level was pretty high, right, Ron? So
yeah.
I think that it's easy for us to paint the picture of the drug addict being the poor, downtrodden African-American man who's shiftless and lazy, and he's only looking to get his next hit. But if you look at it statistically, and again, everything that I'm saying on this interview can be verified. So I'm not, as in a hood would say, I'm not spitting wolf tickets. It's a fact of the matter that the majority of all your drug addicts and drug users are Caucasians, but that doesn't sell. I mean, it's just like there's a saying in the newspaper world: if it leads, it bleeds, and nothing leads and bleeds like black men getting arrested, black men selling drugs, black men doing drugs. So.
Yeah, I mean, I just looking at it, it was amazing. Like, I heard about it before. It's kind of like when people talk about the biggest audience for black music or hip-hop music are white people. And then, like you said, the biggest market for drugs are white people in this country. But it's like every time there's a problem in this country, whether it be with drugs or violence, it has a black face to it. And I think what you said.
Oh no. Well, I mean, I was gonna say, dude. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure you remember the whole Willie Horton thing, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they do caucus, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like, hell, like, what's a better way to scare people? I mean, like, the United States is all about deflection. They're not about being honest with themselves and realizing that. It's just like today in 2014, the biggest drug epidemic is methamphetamine use. I'm from the Midwest, so I can tell you that meth use is out of control. I mean, we're seeing trailers getting blown up. We've got folks cooking meth in McDonald's bathrooms. I mean, just ridiculous. But for some reason, that doesn't get the same attention as back in the day with Dare and crack. Like the whole slogans, crack is whack.
Right.
Don't do drugs. But we don't see that, and therefore that's why we have this epidemic, because that's a drug that's predominantly used by Caucasians.
So it's like meth users are predominantly Caucasians. They're not really a large black population. Using meth at all? Okay.
That is correct. No. I mean, when doing research for the book, and I tried to make the book as diverse as possible. Like, I was trying to talk to male users, female users, old, young, gay, straight, people who have just gotten off. And with San Diego, I mean, that San Diego also has a fairly sizable methamphetamine problem, and 98% of all the people that I came in contact with that use meth were Caucasian.
When you say that, because the reason why I said it, because I know you saw. Have you seen the movie Silver Linings Playbook? Have you seen that movie?
Dude, love that movie, dude.
What do you think about Chris Tucker's character? Right? They say he was a meth head, right?
Right.
Is that what they said in the movie? That he had a meth problem?
No, you know what? I think Chris Tucker was. I think he was on medication. I think that he suffered from some type of mental instability. They didn't quite allude to if he was on drugs or not, but I know that he was in the same mental institution as Bradley Cooper's character.
Okay, cool. I thought they said meth. I don't know, some reason I thought. Well, I heard the word meth medication. I'm not sure. But just the fact that even, they was trying to make a black face into a white problem, that's problematic for me. Because even the person who did the Lee Atwater campaign, Lee Atwater, he's a Willie Horton. Lee Atwater is a Republican strategist. I mean, he utilized black culture for his own ends. Like, he, was a blues player, guitar, blues singer. They even appointed him to be on the Howard Board of Directors at one point, and students, they protested that, and so he resigned. It's like there's always a co-opting of black people in this country to do certain things, to pass certain type of laws. For example, like the crack and coke policy thing that got passed back in the 90s, where black folks get more longer terms than white people who utilize cocaine. Do you see a lot of race play out and when you was investigating your book? Do you see a lot of racism coming up?
Okay, so let me get back to you had touched on something really, really important. You had talked about the crack cocaine laws that were created and passed in the late in the late 80s. So just so a lot of people, I mean, maybe a lot of people don't realize this, but with the advent and the discovery of crack cocaine, there were many laws that were passed to aggressively punish drug dealers, and one of them was a crack cocaine disparity, which it was when it was introduced, it was 100 to 1. So what that means is that a person can have 5 grams of crack, and they'll get a harsh sentence. Now, the disparity would be another person would have to have 100 times of grams of cocaine. So you see so the disparity was 100 to 1. So many of the crack users and dealers were African Americans as well as Latinos. Now, if you know anything about drugs, and you know, and again, I've been in houses where them boys have been rocking that stuff up. Mm-hmm. You would know that crack is essentially cocaine and baking soda and water. But why does crack get the harsher term? Why was there a mandatory minimum of 5 years minimum for crack possession, for crack usage? But when it comes to cocaine, you have to have, you know, this amazingly large number compared to that, you know? So I mean, so that right there, that really targets many African Americans and Latinos. So what that does is that sort of imbalances the conviction rates. I mean, because again, like you know, most Caucasians, most whites, they didn't use crack cocaine. So under this guise of, hey, you know, we're going to get tough on crime, what that did was that just imprisoned a lot of Black and Latino people who were even first-time offenders. I mean, these are nonviolent offenses, Ron. I mean, mm-hmm. in the United States prison system, minimum 80% of all of your convicts and prisoners are due to nonviolent offenses. So you mean to tell me that if I have 5 grams of crack, and that's not a lot of crack. Mm-hmm. If I have 5 grams of crack, I'm getting like an automatic 5 years. I'm getting a felony. I'm not going to get any kind of diversion. Whereas if I have 5 grams of cocaine, I may get probation, maybe a slap on the wrist. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's total crap.
Even when you were saying that there, I'm also thinking about the Rockefeller laws up in New York State. How they even came before the crack coke policy thing.
Oh my God, dude! Like, we're talking about draconian to say the least, man. I mean, these, you know, one thing that doing straight dope and doing the research that I've done, it was probably the best quote in the entire book. Was a woman. She was a meth addict, and she had said, you know, drug addicts are sick. You know, you don't put sick people, you know, in prison, do you? If someone has cancer, you don't convict that person and lock them away. I think that we need to look at drug abuse and drug addiction as a form of illness, because I mean, dude, like, no one really wants to be a crackhead, man. Straight up. I mean, and by us warehousing these folk, not only are we spending tons of money, I mean, instead of simply treating the problem and getting them back into society, we're just warehousing them, and we're just making it worse, man.
Well, then you look at the fact that they privatized prisons for the most part. Basically, prisons have been privatized. So how can you reverse that trend of sending folks to jail for nonviolent drug offenses where you also making a profit off them as well? Can that be reversed?
Oh, my God. Yo, dude, like, shout out to my man Josh Stamps, because we were just speaking on this. And also shout out to Matthew Ryan, because we are also talking about this issue of corporate prisons. Anyone that straight up, if you're a stockholder or if you own a prison, fuck you, because you're like, excuse my language, but that's not good money. I mean, it's like what my mom said, all money ain't good money. So what happens is that you have these laws that are passed that are powered by these lobbying groups to create, in the hood we would call it catch me's. So you create a catch me law, pretty much like what that means is like you can't help but to get busted, right? So you catch these laws. You pass these laws that the average person is going to have the hardest time trying to not get caught, and that funnels the person into prison. I think the last quote I read was it's $30,000 a year per person in prison. So if you are a shareholder, if you are a corporation that owns prisons, hell, you know what? You want to keep that money coming in. So what do? You lobby and you get behind politicians that want to make this stance of tough on crime so you can keep your money machine going. I mean, it's all economic.
Wow, so somebody else's misery, somebody else's millions. Turning misery into millions.
Brother, I could not put it any better. That was kind of ill, right?
yeah. I'm just listening to you, but you got so much knowledge. Like, one thing you also did that I like in the book is that when people think about American drug culture, they're thinking about illegal drugs. Well, that's where you show in your book different stories of people abusing pharmaceuticals or legal drugs.
Right.
And that's something that don't really get a lot of play as well. It's like, when you abuse the pharmaceuticals or legal drugs, it's like more like a white-collar thing to me versus the street drugs.
Ron, man, like one of the things that I wanted to do with Straight Dope was, again, I wanted to reframe our drug problem, or just the way of life with us when it comes to drugs. And we don't think about people abusing prescription drugs, man. I mean, it's truly one of our great sins of the past 10 to 15 years is that we're not the DEA and medical associations, they haven't taken a more stringent approach towards that. Because, dude, like, the young lady that I spoke with, Stephanie, she had a really her story was really great. In the book, I believe Stephanie's story is number 4. She was telling me how her evolution came from, smoking weed, drinking a lot of alcohol, to working in a pharmacy, working around drugs, and essentially falsifying documents to get prescription drugs, man. And it's one of those things. I mean, in Florida, you have these drug dispensaries. They call them pill mills because people will because I believe that prescription drug use and the ability to get these drugs, it's very lax. So that's how you have a whole generation of folk that are lost to things such as OxyContin and things like that. But again, the government is playing catch up when it comes to that. And it's funny because drugs like that, it's not for lack of a better term, it's not desexualized. You know how like back in the day, to be a crackhead would just be yo, you know what? You can't be a crackhead. You filthy. You dirty. Yada yada yada. Right? It was just totally demystified. Nowadays, you don't have that when it comes to things like Oxy. Things like Rox. Things like Vicodin. I mean, and it's really sad, man. I mean, it's like now there's these little campaigns to don't abuse prescription drugs, but it's too late.
I mean,
because I mean.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, brother, like people our age, we know not to we know not to use crack.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because it's
right.
like, to be a crackhead, that means you lost in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's no push to not do those kind of drugs, and unfortunately, people are just getting hooked, and their lives are just thrown away. You know.
Yeah, I also actually this because I think it's interesting you brought up prescription drugs and also the legal drugs. It seems like to me that a lot of people are dying from prescription drugs, the use of prescription drugs more so than street drugs. And is it correct to say that? And also, is it correct to say that what's killing people from street drugs is not necessarily the drug itself, but what's being used to cut the drugs? Is that what really killing people on the street?
Well, I think that that a lot of the drugs nowadays, a lot of the street drugs nowadays are being, as you say, they're being cut with a lot of inferior product. So for those that don't know what cut means, that means essentially you're just mixing and you're diluting the drug. Like, for example, if you get heroin, right? Mm-hmm. There's no way that you can shoot heroin pure, because I mean that's called a hot shot, and that will kill you. No one can take that. So you have to constantly cut it to the point where it's a bit weaker, but it still has this kick. Nowadays, since there's so many dope boys out here and there's so much competition, people are having to stretch their drugs, man. I mean, you know what, dude? I've heard of cats making X with like cocaine, rat poisoning. I mean, I've heard guys that used to make meth with Mylanta switch into other stuff, man, just to, you know, differentiate themselves on the market. And therefore, since the quality has been compromised, it's become sort of more dangerous, and that, you know, that can cause adverse reactions. Hence, as you just put it, Brother Ronald, people die. You know.
Well, man, it's this. Like, it is a catch-22. It's kind of confusing to me when we talk about, you know, you having the war on drugs, but it's like the people that create the legislation and set the policy are the biggest drug dealers and the biggest traffickers.
100%. There was a brother out there, Caucasian brother. His name was Gary Webb. Gary Webb wrote a book called Dark Alliance. If anyone is not familiar with Gary Webb, there's going to be a movie that's going to come out with my man Jeremy Renner. It's called Kill the Messenger, and what it is essentially about is that Gary Webb, along with Representative Maxine Waters and others, they found out that the CIA was in conjunction with militia groups in Nicaragua flooding drugs into the inner city. Again, I'm not making this up. You can look it up. You can Google it. Unfortunately, Brother Webb is not with us, but it's true. I mean, it kind of goes back to when the settlers came to America, right? And they interacted with the Native Americans. What did they do? They brought over what they at first called firewater, but of course it was alcohol. That's why a large chunk of the Native American population has such a problem with alcohol. Matter of fact, some reservations are dry reservations because got them drunk, gave them blankets of smallpox, and that's how the settlers took over America. So if you fast forward to the 70s and 80s with COINTELPRO, they had to neutralize many of the black revolutionaries and many of the black uprisings, as you know, as well as to sort of sedate the population. So what happened? They started flooding the hood with cocaine. Then the boys from South Central came up with crack, which crack essentially gets its name from. There's two urban legends. Either It was named. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm listening. I was listening.
So there's two urban legends behind it. Either it was called crack because whenever you make it, it cracks into shards of drugs, right? Or it's called crack because it cracks. You know, like snap, crackle, pop.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they call it crack. And so again, like crack would not be so dominant in the inner city if it wasn't for the intervention of the CIA flooding cocaine into the inner city. So you're right.
Government, right? This is basically our government doing. So it's the government. So the CIA are the biggest drug traffickers in the world. It's like, because I know you're familiar with Mena, Arkansas as well, right? Mena, Arkansas, back in the 80s.
No, I'm not actually.
Mena, Arkansas was a place like the CIA had an airport in Mena, Arkansas, where Bill Clinton was governor. They actually had planes running from there to South America to Colombia, delivering cocaine.
Wow.
And so they have distributed that from that point to the rest of the country. But there's a documentary about Mena, Arkansas. That's when Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas. Yes, sir. This back in the 80s.
Wow, I did not realize that.
But I'm saying, what I'm saying is that people got to realize that, like, Freeway Ricky Ross was functionally illiterate. You know, he had a chance to go to college on a tennis scholarship, but he couldn't read or write. So, I mean, like, how can you blame this guy as being the mastermind behind, like, spreading crack throughout the whole country? He had to have some help.
Exactly. You know what? It's. I mean, not to quote New Jack City, but I mean, it's just like what Nino Brown said. Mm-hmm. There ain't no poppy seeds in Harlem.
That's right.
You know, and I mean, though, but it's real, man. I mean, it's like, dude, like, you know, it's got to be getting in there somewhere. So, people really, you know, I'm not a what do you call it? I'm not a cynic. I'm just a realist. People have to understand the war on drugs is its own cottage industry. So let's just think about this for a second, right? So let's say we wipe out drugs today. Let's say, you know, Brother Ronald had a magic wand. He said, you know what, there's going to be no more drugs in the United States. So what happens is that prisons start to get less populated. So that means jobs. So that means there's more COs on the breadline. So that means that there's very little crime because again, 80% of all of your prisoners are on nonviolent drug offenses. So you have, so that means less police presence is needed on the streets. Police are on the breadline. That means that you have less courts are being filled up. So you have clerks, you have DAs, you have judges on the breadline. I mean, it's its own thing. So in order to necessitate the need for these entities, there has to be this constant flow of drugs. I mean, if people really think that the government is about stopping drugs, you need to really look yourself in the mirror and ask why it hasn't happened yet. I mean, and on top of that, if we stop using drugs, hell, we have Mexico is dependent on us because we're still the biggest consumer of drugs on the entire planet. So most of our cocaine comes from Mexico, and most of our heroin comes from India as well as from Afghanistan. So we have all these different economies that are dependent on our habit.
And so that's crazy, though. I mean, even reading your book, I would suggest people read your book because you do a great job of just showing different perspectives of how this drug culture really affects people from the bottom up. I mean, you guys got different stories, how people have benefited from the drug culture, how people have been hurt for generational trauma.
Right.
You know, like in the book, you got several stories of kids using with their parents and their parents, uncles and aunts, and everybody's like a family tradition thing. And we're not just talking about black people; these are white people, white middle class folks.
Oh, absolutely.
Not black people in the hood.
Dude, I mean, like, there was one of my favorite stories in the book. There, can't think of the gentleman's name off the top of my head, but he talked about how he was smoking weed with his sister. He like 6 or 7, and he started using coke at 9. He was introduced to this by his family. So I mean that as you said, it's like a family tradition. It's like when I get together with my family, we play Monopoly. When he got together with his family, he snorted a line. So it's crazy.
Yeah, and also like this the revolving door of prison. I mean, like I think that's the same guy. His family, he was coming out of prison the same time his mom and sister came out like a year or so before out of prison.
Yeah,
I mean, like it's just crazy how this thing works. And I want to ask you this, since we know this about our government, and I use the term our government very loosely. Should we legalize drugs? Should we legalize drugs?
You know, man, that's a tough one, man. I mean, because if we legalize drugs, that's a Rubicon that we cannot go back. I mean, with what we know as far as drugs being addicted. Well, okay, first off, what we need to do is the biggest mistake that schools and governments, et cetera, and parents do is that they blanket all drugs as the same, and it's not. Marijuana is obviously less lethal than, say, crack, and LSD is not on the level of heroin. So I don't use marijuana. I don't personally, for me, I think that unless you're Willie Nelson or Snoop Dogg, I think you kind of a cornball sitting up and puffing on a J daily. But that's just me, though. But with that being said, I think about the economic advantages and also the resources that we can gain from legalizing marijuana. So I'm for legalization of marijuana. Colorado has this economic boom of legalization. Not only is the money going, not only how is it taxed, but it's going towards schools, different programs. The roads are being fixed. I mean, just all these things that make Colorado great. It's being magnified because of the dollars. You have people wanting to move there, wanting to start up businesses. So it's so many pluses. But going back to what I said earlier, I still deep in my heart believe that it is a sort of introductory drug. So, any other drug, man, I don't think so. There's no reason for you to legalize cocaine or legalize ecstasy. I mean, there's no positives to it whatsoever. I mean, I would feel uneasy if I'm in Walmart and if some kid in front of me is like, yo, let me get that 8-ball. You know what I mean? I mean, kind of that would just kind of throw me off. But on the flip side, though, Ron, when I was in Amsterdam, if anyone's ever been to Amsterdam, it's an amazing city, and different kind of drugs are legal there, and the crime rate is incredibly low. So I mean, I would say no, but I don't know, man. I mean, it's something to be said about people having the choice to wanting to do things instead of doing it illicitly.
Yeah, I always think about it. Like you said about cocaine will be a use for it. I remember like 100-something years ago, you was able to buy cocaine from your drugstore in America. And I know they used to give cocaine to black workers on the docks and whatnot to make them work faster and more efficient and take less breaks. They would give them cocaine.
Right.
And one of our presidents that I know, Franklin Roosevelt, used to snort cocaine for quote-unquote nasal problem.
Really?
Yeah, he used to give him cocaine. He had nasal issues. That's what he said. That's what they said.
Yeah.
So he used to snort cocaine. But, that's not even something new or whatever. Like, you got presidents like Bill Clinton that say he smoked it in hell, and Barack Obama, he partaked in some blow and some other stuff. And, I'm just saying, it's kind of hypocritical for me to sit here and ruin people's lives over, like, things like marijuana. I just think it's kind of crazy that you would destroy not only this person's life, but generations of this person's family over marijuana, over small doses. And, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I mean, dude, it's like marijuana's not the same thing, man. I mean, it's like you have people, you know, man, I never forget, I was watching, and at this interview really, I think this kind of sparked why I wanted to do Straight Dope, was that this young man is a young white guy, hippie dude. He's rolling around in his van in the 90s, and he got busted for having a pound of for having a pound of weed, a pound of hash, and he got 10 years. And it's like, damn, B, like 10 years for some weed? Like, wow. I mean, a pound ain't nothing. But, you know, we're just blanketing this, oh, well, all drugs are bad, you know. I mean, you know, just say no when we're not being honest. So this young man's life is totally ruined. You know, he has a felony. That means that he's cut off from so many things. You can't even get a passport, kid. So all this stuff is just, I mean, you're you know, as you said before, man, your life is ruined. And we need to really re-examine how we do this. I mean, we need to decriminalize marijuana to the point where it's treated like a parking ticket, man.
So what do you say?
Because there's no... Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought. I want to hop in on the last thing. Go ahead.
No, I just think that there's no reason for someone to be going to jail because they have a couple joints. I mean, it's, you know, it's just ridiculous. I mean, all it does is it clogs our judicial system. You know, all it does is it packs an already overcrowded prison system with people that don't even need to be in there, people that could be victimized, people that are otherwise smart but maybe made some ill-advised choices. I mean, it makes no sense, man.
That's what I think about the fact that Colorado and Washington State both have legalized marijuana. Like you said, in Colorado, the economy has been boosted by the legalization of marijuana. It makes me ponder this as well. Will black people, the same black folks who were, like, you look at Prohibition, for example, right? A lot of white folks made a killing in Prohibition, but yet they was able to legitimize it once they repealed Prohibition. They was able to legitimize their fortune by whatever means. Do you think that some of these same black people who are people of color who are dealing or distributing marijuana illegally, will they have a chance to get into this new business as legitimate business?
Yeah, man, that's a really good question, man. I mean, you know, will the average D-boy, you know, dealing in some herb, will he be able to legitimize his income and become a Joe Kennedy?
Right.
You know, man,
exactly.
See, the thing about it is like I think that the market is so flooded with you know, these marijuana recommendation shops that, you know, it's gonna be hard for people to get in, man. I mean, it's like one of those things where a really good friend of mine, Des, was telling me, he's like, she lives in Denver now. She's like, Denver's starting to get more expensive, starting to get lame because there's so many people moving in and trying to get on like the pot train, and it's like, that's a really interesting question. I mean, because if you look at it, right, like Colorado and Washington don't have a large black population. Mm-hmm. So, again, like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm not a cynic, but, it's something to be said that the two of the whitest states have the marijuana legalized.
Right.
I couldn't see a place like New York getting marijuana legal. A place like California even getting marijuana legalized. So I mean, unless them boys move to Washington, Colorado, and figure out a different way of selling it, man, I don't know. But I mean, good luck to them. Hell, whatever they can do to get out the streets.
Yeah, but I'm saying the reason why I think they legalized at this point is because you had white business interests already organized to take advantage, to be the first people in. You already had people with money and resources say, we're going to legalize this. We're going to, corner the market. Just like after Prohibition was repealed, you already had people Like, look at Seagrams. They were working with Joe Kennedy in the mall, distributing their brand throughout the country. And then they was able to take control of the markets and stuff like that once it became legitimate. But I also look at somebody like, what about Snoop Dogg? Like, you talked about Snoop Dogg earlier and Willie Nelson. In particular, Snoop Dogg, the guy who promotes marijuana use and smoking. Could he be the type of person that could bring some leverage, say, you know what, I want to move into this market? He got resources, he got connections, and also it would be a win-win. He can employ brothers and sisters from the community to kind of like marijuana Magic Johnson.
Right. Well, like I think Snoop Dogg, like he's getting into that because he touts and he promotes this sort of e-vape pen that he smokes marijuana. It's like a an electronic or like an electric cigarette. I don't really know too much about it, but he's selling that, and he's supposedly making a killing, man. So I mean, he's a pretty smart brother. So I wouldn't be surprised, man. I mean, hell, like, if one of your tenets in life is getting high, man. I mean, hell, why not? And I mean,
even Wiz Khalifa, right? I could see Wiz Khalifa doing something like that. I mean, I'm just saying, like, you could make $1 billion. This is what I'm understanding. Like, this is America, and unfortunately, America. If you could find some misery, you could profit from it. Somebody else's misery is somebody else's pot of gold. That's what I look at. This is America. This is how we operate and function over here. Man. I want to ask you about your book because your book was so proud to me. Like I said, I read it in one sitting because you had so many different, screenplay treatments. Like I think you are a screenwriter as well, correct if I'm not mistaken?
Yes.
I mean, you had so many treatments for feature movies in all those chapters. I mean, very
man, like I'm actually working on a fictional product based on Straight Dope. Like Straight Dope was going to be a nonfiction book, and also it was going to be a fictional book. I mean, it's still in its infancy, but there's a lot of material. And I'm also in the sort of conceptualizing Straight Dope 2. A lot of things that I wasn't able to do with Straight Dope 1, I'm gonna do with Straight Dope 2, but I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to try to compile as much stuff to where I mean, we're talking about, like, I'm going to take you into what it's like to be in a crack house, you know what I mean? I'm going to take you into, being in a detox facility. I mean, I'm going to talk to police officers, I'm going to talk to DAs, criminal lawyers. So, I mean, it's going to be way ramped up than the first one. I mean, the first one is the proverbial tip of the iceberg. The second one is going to be crazy. I'm trying to give you the absolute most realistic and definitive account of drugs in America. So just when it comes out, buckle up because I'm going bodyguard hard. So straight up.
I'll never agree. I look forward to that second coming or that second helping know what you're doing. Before we move on to our next segment, I want to ask you. I want you to stay on for the next segment as well. I want to ask you how difficult was it to get the stories for this first book? Were you able to get everything in one book so far, or you had to leave something out, some stories out?
Well, there was one portion that I didn't use because me and one of the interviewees, we were talking, and she had told me this story that involved her family, and I turned off the tape recorder and I was silent for about a minute. I said, I don't think we should put this in the book. I'm all for a great story, Ron, but I'm not for just. There's a limit that I can go. We all have limits, and I just didn't think that it was right. But for the most part, man, I mean, I did have difficulties speaking with police because again, I'm going to be talking to them about their views and about what they do. And so some of them felt that, hey, you know what, you may demonize me. you may slight my work. You know, I may not be quoted correctly, so they decline. And of course, it costs money to have lawyers talk to you. I mean, because hell, man, like, you know, ain't nobody trying to work for free.
Right.
So, you know, but I mean, hopefully, I will be able to get some barristers to kind of talk to me though this time.
I just want to encourage everybody to read this Prop's work, Straight Dope, a 360-degree look into American drug culture, which is available on Amazon.com. And also you can check out Brother LeRon Barton on his main website at mainlinepub.com. Is that correct?
Right. Yes, sir. And I'm also on Twitter, Mainline LeRon. I'm sorry, you like at Mainline LeRon. You know, I'm always looking to collaborate with folk. I mean, I don't care where you are in the world, who you are. You know, if you're dope and if you want to work, I'm down with working with you. So, you know, in anything. So,
Sounds like a master plan to me.